Ooh, hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. I do hope you're having a good day. Today's podcast number 20, is with one of my best friends, Jonah Grunsell. Yes, we talked about how his life, his times, what he's been doing, mostly over his career. Hopefully this will be the first of many podcasts I might be doing with him. But nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed today's show. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, have a great day. Hey, peace. Okay, hello my friends, hello my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're having a good day. This is podcast number 20 with my good friend.
20.
Yes, 20 podcasts with my good friend Jonah Grunsell. I have known this lad for, oh my God, countless years. It was a nice hot sunny day in Holloway, and and that's when a beautiful friendship was born.
Indeed, it's probably 25 years, maybe.
Could be
25
years.
Yeah,
25 years. At that time, you were working in R Price, I believe.
R Price Records.
Yep.
I'm not sure if any of your listeners are old enough to remember the time that there were music shops and places you actually went to buy music.
Well, you'll be surprised.
You'll be surprised, but yeah, R Price Records. Rest in peace, but yeah.
Yeah, like with that, over that course of time, you have been, how can I say, you have been a rather busy bee. Like from your time at university, when you became Liverpool University's student president.
Yep.
From there, you went on to, I believe it was it? Oh my Lord, why am I blanking on this? I want to say Accenture.
It was just before that. I was at Scope, the charity Scope. I was their parliamentary officer, but then Accenture. Yeah.
Okay. And how long were you at Scope for?
Scope was just a year. Mm-hmm. And then I started at Accenture. So yeah.
What does, as a parliamentary officer, what does that entail?
So it's basically a lobbyist. So it was liaising with MPs and Lords to kind of put across the views of the charity to try and get changes in law around disability. Okay.
Was it something you enjoyed, or?
I did, although I think I had slightly rose-tinted glasses about politicians, having studied at a university. I kind of thought they were all, naively, I thought they were all incredibly decent, truthful human beings. And I think having worked with them for a year, some of them are, but a pretty small proportion are.
Okay.
So yeah.
So with that, you learned all politicians don't tell the truth.
Unfortunately, so which won't be news to anyone else, but naively for me at the time, I learned that harsh lesson.
Okay, no problem. And then off to the world of management consultancy with Accenture.
Yeah, probably alongside estate agents, one of the kind of least kind of popular and most derided kind of careers. But yeah.
Why? Yeah. And why do you say that?
Well, I think the stereotype of a management consultant is they charge a lot of money to tell you exactly what you knew in the first place. Which I'm sure there are lots of management consultants who do that. I'd like to think that that's for me, but yeah, I think that's the reason they don't have a great rep.
Okay. And with joining Accenture, where were you working first of all for them?
So they sold me the dream of a strategy consultancy that'd be traveling the world, solving problems. And I got very excited about that. And then the first kind of assignment was up in Newcastle with an Inland Revenue kind of HMRC project, writing test scripts for the Inland Revenue system in an old army bunker. So it was. I kind of felt I'd slightly been missold on a consultant dream, to be honest. But yeah, so I managed to kind of stick it out for a few months, and then politely and nicely and constructively said this wasn't quite what I was sold, and I thought I could maybe add a bit more value, not writing test scripts, and maybe doing something a bit more related to my previous experience and kind of strategy. So then I got moved down to London to work on kind of strategy projects with the Home Office.
Yeah. Nice, fantastic. And strategy projects with the Home Office, it's you seem to find your way back to politics in the early half of your sort of career, being president of the student union, Scope, and then back to Home Office.
And mainly in the few years I worked at Accenture, it was kind of mainly central government kind of departments I work with, as well as people like police and kind of local authorities and things. But the kind of draw of the kind of public services and trying to find a link to what I do to something that matters and something that actually has impact. So it's never really been in my nature to want to just help people make more money. I think people should work for a clear purpose to actually make a difference to this world. So I think I've always wanted to do something that's actually more directly linked to that, rather than advising a big company about how to make more profit or anything like that.
Right. So basically, with that going forward from there, like I know sort of hop, skipping and jumping, like you've sort of now, like I know through our personal friendship, you've worked in the charity sector, helping them. Like with that, what's the sort of is there some type of bigger picture you're trying to help them with, or?
It kind of varies, yes. So, I mean, after 8 or so years working mainly in government with a few big firms, I kind of turned to the charity sector and set up my own company in 2010 doing that. And it tends to be, I mean, a lot of the large charities have similar challenges to large companies or medium-sized companies. It's about trying to generate more income in order to be able to spend more money on the people that they serve and their beneficiaries, which could be medical research, it could be kind of cancer support nurses, it could be a whole range of services. So what they tend to need help and advice on doing is how best to operate in order to deliver more to the people that they serve, to be more efficient, to be more effective. So it's tended to be either helping them on things like their strategy, or helping them restructure, or things around their fundraising strategy, or ways in which they can save money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And you say in 2010 you started your own company. Like,
yeah.
Can you tell us more about why you did that?
I think I realised I wasn't brilliant at being told what to do in large companies, and I dealing with internal politics and kind of climbing the ladder in large firms means having to work with people that you don't always respect or like, and I think I realised that I'm not brilliant at being told what to do, and I wanted the freedom to do work that I felt mattered and made a difference. I didn't want to be selling work to people who didn't need the work, which as you get more senior in management consultancy, you have sales targets and you have to find ways to sell things.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to sleep at night.
Okay.
I kind of wanted to ensure that actually the work that I was doing, people wanted me to do it and needed me to do it, rather than I'd found a way to convince them that they needed me.
Right.
So I set up with a business partner at the time, Andrew Hargreaves, and we ended up focusing on the charity sector because we felt that was an area where there wasn't a lot of kind of support around professional services, and there were organisations, some of them big organisations that have big problems and do need help and support, and really need some advice in order to operate better.
Okay. And like, this is a thing you mentioned, like sleep at night, like with regards to like setting up your own business, that I know it's like hand to God, is that the reality of it, or what?
Well, I mean,
what's like a working day? Because look, when you say
it's fair to say, and clearly we know each other very well. Manage your own business, which I've done a few different businesses over the last 10 years, it's a lot of work. And I haven't had many holidays in 10 years. Haven't had a whole lot of sleep. I think what I do helps me sleep at night because I'm passionate about what I do and the organisations that I work with, and I work with some amazing people. Managing a business is incredibly tough. And I've had times, and it hasn't always gone well. I've had businesses that haven't worked, and timed when work's tough, when clients don't need you, and wanting to run a business that actually helped people who needed help. What it does mean is suddenly if they don't need your help, for a whole variety of good reasons, because the economy's kind of take a downturn, or just because they just don't have any problems that they need your advice or help on, it means then you don't have much work. So, and there's been a few times over the last 10 years that it's been like that. So it has been tough, yeah. And I haven't had a lot of sleep, to be fair.
Like when you say it's been tough, what has been like one of your sort of tough moments, you would say, where like the road hasn't been that smooth, or you've just found it a little bit more challenging?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, work really dried up on the consultancy side, and I had kind of 4 or 5 months where work just wasn't coming in. And I still had a mortgage to pay, and I still had bills to pay, and that's when you need your friends and you as well as need I guess that I won't say inner strength. That sounds silly, but you need to kind of believe that it will get better, and you need to have that kind of positivity. And if it wasn't for that tough few months, I wouldn't have ended up joining Aileron.
Yeah.
It was those few months that I then thought, why don't I have a conversation with some of my competition with a view to potentially see if we could collaborate and things. And that's ended up me now being deputy CEO of Aileron, who were one of my competitors, and we kind of agreed to kind of join forces. And if I hadn't had that tough moment, I probably would have slightly arrogantly thought I could just do this myself, I could just carry on. But it made me realise that it was pretty lonely running a business by myself, and that actually wanting to be part of something bigger would be a more enjoyable, but also a far more kind of sustainable way to go. So,
yeah, I think many a person often, when you see people starting their own businesses and stuff like this, they get to either see the upside or the downside. They don't actually sort of see the in between. And with the in between, it can be kind of, you're there by yourself. You don't really have that sort of camaraderie of people around you, which can be somewhat tough.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it's also, from my experience, about really trusting your gut instinct. I mean, the businesses that haven't got so well, so I co-owned a restaurant for a bit, and it was while I was very busy on the consultancy side, and I didn't, my gut feel was saying that something wasn't quite right, that we perhaps were not generating as much income as we might, and that probably I should be asking more questions of my business partners. And I didn't go with my gut instincts, and we ended up having to sell after 4 years. But and it was great. I was very, very proud of the restaurant that we built. But that was an example of trying to do too much and not going with my gut instinct.
Okay, and like gut instinct, like trusting yourself, must be quite challenging on a day-to-day basis. With regards to a restaurant, was that the Imperial?
It was the Imperial.
Okay. What did you find, like, going from sort of management consultancy to the restaurant trade? That is, how can I say, that is quite a sort of leap of a different, like...
It was. I mean, I've always loved food.
Yes.
Sometimes too much.
So me too.
It was something I'd always wanted to do, and I had an opportunity, having sold a business, to get involved. I mean, I think it's a real test of your kind of business acumen. Being a management consultant, you speak quite theoretically about kind of business improvement and things, but a restaurant is really on the coalface. It's really, if you get it wrong, if you get your menu wrong, if you get your pricing wrong, you know about it immediately. You know about it from the reviews you get on TripAdvisor. You know about it from your take, and it's a real test in terms of how you can run a business. The reason that other than liking food and wine, the other reason I wanted to do it is that the other thing about management consultancy is you often don't always see the results of what you do. If you do a new strategy or help a client do a new strategy, or whether it be a fundraising strategy or an organizational strategy, it can be years until the impact of that strategy gets felt. So it's not very tangible. So you might be working incredibly hard with them. You've created something that you hope will make a massive difference, and then you end up going off to do something else, for a different client. You're not around to see the impact. Whereas, and it works both ways, when it goes well as when it doesn't go well. With a restaurant, you immediately see, if you get it right and you have a packed restaurant and people are laughing and having a great time, enjoying great food, you know immediately, and it's really gratifying to see that immediately. If you've changed the menu, you've changed the music in the restaurant, you've changed the wine list, you change the staff, and you see it make an impact immediately, and that's incredibly rewarding. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Excellent. So, like, this is the thing: you like theoretical, practical, and like, if you had to say to a person which would be the better sort of learning curve.
Oh, practical certainly. I learned an incredible amount about myself, about some of the tests of some of that theory in terms of business theory. So the practical side, I think a lot of management consultants, or just a lot of people, don't get involved in that practical side, and may not understand why your favorite restaurant down the road is closed, or think about what goes into, for instance, running a restaurant. Everything about where you buy your food, how you use your ingredients, what happens if it's snowing outside and no one comes. All those really tiny details are incredibly important, and it really makes you think about and need to worry about the real detail in running a business.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, like, this is the thing. I think too many people, like, as I said before, they see the upside, the downside, but they don't see the middle. And I've heard people say about people running successful businesses, they're really, they're so lucky. It's like they're doing it without really trying it. And you kind of like go, what? It's like, and you like go, what? It makes no sense to me. And I don't know, you might have run across some people like that in your time.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both know that the direct impact of me running businesses the last 10 years, that we haven't got as much time to spend with each other. Cancelling plans at last minute. It's an incredible hard work. I mean, when it works out, it's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and anyone who runs a business, whatever size, I have huge amount of respect for, because it is incredibly tough. Incredibly tough.
Yeah, no, but and also with another thing with your job, one of the things you must really see a lot more clearly than others is, how can I say, the epic mistakes people are making on their sort of day-to-day business. Where they can, I don't know, but like, you know what I mean, not giving away any secrets or anything like that, but you could most really just like, why are you doing this? And why, like,
you do, and I think what's challenging on a personal and emotional level when it comes to large charities is, this is incredibly important stuff that they're doing. Incredibly, kind of saving lives. Kind of work, and while, yes, I come across some fantastic practice and some incredible people that I'm lucky enough to work with, but yes, some of those large organisations, multi-million-pound charities, there are some aspects of how they run the organisation that aren't great, and I mean, they're usually open to advice and thoughts and feedback about that, but I think I find on a personal level that very, very frustrating, given what they're doing is not selling cars. It's not. It's incredibly important stuff that changes people's lives. And the duty of them, therefore, to be as good as they can be, to not waste money, to behave in the best way possible, both in terms of how they treat their staff as well as how they treat the people that they serve. It can be difficult because, yes, in those 10 years where I've largely worked with charities, I have come across some bits of practice and bits of how organisations are run that shouldn't be the way they are.
Yeah, one of the things I would say I've seen with sort of large charities is sometimes how they deal with the sort of changeover with sort of new media and how they sort of interact with that. I think it's a case of they see it, but they don't get it, or they get it, but they don't want to do it yet until something forces them.
That's a really interesting question, actually, because most charities, when it comes to their fundraising and marketing, are very different from the private sector. They prioritise mainstream TV when it comes to how they spend money. and they've been very slow to react on the digital front, and don't prioritize that, even though people are moving away from mainstream TV with subscription services and just the change of the media landscape. But I think a lot of charities are in my view, overly focused on the fact that it's only TV which can make an emotional impact. It's only TV advertising that can change hearts and minds. Whereas the private sector, if you look at examples such as Dove or which had a big campaign about positive body image, they didn't just rely on TV adverts then. They were still trying to make an emotional point, an emotional connection to their product, but they really prioritized the digital side and didn't just rely on mainstream TV.
Didn't they have a Throw Like a Girl campaign, Dove, where they basically went, what does it mean when you throw like a girl? And they got like all these different ladies to come in and talk about what it meant, and then it was like, but that was Dove, and like that was, and I think I saw that on Facebook first of all.
Yeah, exactly, and the ones, and that's where the private sector recognise that where the people they want to impact, either make an emotional connection and ultimately, of course, to sell them things, they operate and advertise and prioritise where those people are, and those people are increasingly not just watching mainstream TV, which on catch up they can forward your expensive advert pretty easily, and they recognise that if you want to make an emotional connection, which private sector companies want to do just as much as charities do, you don't need to rely on TV to do that. And the challenge with charities and their over focus, in my view, on TV is it's very expensive. It's the most expensive channel. So by prioritising TV kind of advertising, they actually spend a lot of money. Whereas if they changed their channel mix and really prioritise on the digital side, they could make just as much impact but save a lot of money.
Okay. Say if I was a charity and I went, want to like get our message across, do promotion. We love print, we love TV, but we're thinking about the digital space. Where would you sort of like, I don't know if this is like your sort of expertise, but you know what I mean, what would you say, where would you tell them to go? What would you tell them?
Well, it's not, I mean, it's not my particular area of expertise, but I mean, certainly obvious things like face group. I mean, other than Facebook, Instagram, and kind of obviously kind of Twitter, but the best campaigns are integrated across all of those platforms, and really think about both a TV angle as well as the kind of digital channels. But also, the first step is identifying who do you want to speak to? Because if you want to speak to an age group and a demographic, an audience segment that is largely at home, then you still might want to prioritize TV. If you want to change hearts and minds or really get a powerful message across to the young, then prioritizing mainstream TV with your campaign is not going to work very well, because they're not going to be watching TV. So I think once you're clear about the people you want to get across a key message, whether it be for the private sector a kind of sales message, or for a charity a motive message about why they should give you money, or whether it be a message around heart disease or cancer, really thinking quite carefully about who do you want to get that message across to, and what are the media channels that they are consuming, and then thinking about that in terms of the channel mix, in terms of how you then get that message across. And cinema is one of the main growing channels, because cinema, you can't fast forward cinema. You've got nice surround sound, you've got a very big TV right in front of you in terms of the screen, but plus you can actually segment based on the film. You can know with relatively amount of certainty, you can think about who is watching that. So certain types of films will draw certain types of people, and therefore if you want to get a certain type of message across, you can pick those films, and people usually get in early to watch the trailers, and rather than relying on mainstream TV where it's a bit more scattergun and people might be watching on catch up and can fast forward, on cinema you can get your message across to an audience with huge screen, a big surround sound, and based on the film you can pretty much tell who is going to be receiving that message,
or tailor it to that particular film.
Precisely.
Or genre. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So what sort of like challenges do you think are sort of on the horizon with, say, either the charity sector? Can you foresee coming its way?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious one in terms of the Brexit everyone's been worrying about, even before it had been kind of, I wouldn't say finalised because it hasn't been finalised, but before we actually left the EU, the impact on the economy is huge, and that impacts charities just as much as it kind of impacts small and large businesses, and obviously things like the coronavirus also do that in terms of the economy as well. Also, a few years ago, there's been a lot of government moves to introduce more regulation to the charity sector, particularly around how they handle data, which has impacted charities' ability to look at individual giving, which is when kind of people give direct debits. And in the past, and I think that it's fair to say there are lots of bad practices that a lot of charities engaged in terms of buying the details of people in order to then send them kind of requests to set up a direct debit, which they can't now do. So that's impacted that bit of fundraising. So for charities, it's increasingly tough to raise money because the people who they're trying to raise money from are having a tough time in terms of the economy. And that's not just on things like direct debit. It's also a lot of charities rely a lot on legacies. And obviously if the economy goes down and house prices go down, then that can massively hit those charities which rely heavily on people leaving money in their will, which is usually the value of a house or an estate. And some charities rely on more than half their income on that. So if suddenly there's a big downturn, which then hits house prices, that can hit those charities in a very big way. Yeah,
it must be somewhat difficult to, like, if it was any other type of sort of business, you'd like go, you need to diversify. And from like where I say, I'll go, how would a charity kind of diversify, or what would they look? How would they plan to do that?
I mean, and that's often one of the things that I work with them on in terms of how best to diversify their income kind of portfolio. I mean, it's hard because if charities have been set up based on the income kind of historically, they'll have large teams sometimes doing things like legacies and have a underdeveloped other areas of fundraising, whether that be corporate or major giving or events and sports and various others. So it's usually looking at where the potential is in terms of very much in terms of kind of bringing in income and the audiences in which they might be able to attract, and what then are the activities those audiences want to do. So if you feel that your current fundraising portfolio is largely driven by legacies and it's underdeveloped in things such as sporting events, and you want to bring in more young people, both from a volunteering point of view as well as a supporter point of view, thinking about what those young people want to do, thinking about what other charities are doing, and really thinking quite carefully about what are the mechanisms and vehicles you can put together in order to be able to generate that income. And it's a very crowded space. I mean, things such as sports, there are lots of races and cycle rides and obviously marathons and things that lots of other charities are doing. So trying to find a new thing is often very difficult. And often I think charities fall into the trap of thinking they have to find something completely new in order to be able to generate income, when actually thinking quite carefully about what they're currently doing, how to adapt it to different audiences, how to slim down sometimes the number of fundraising events or kind of vehicles and products that they're doing in order to really prioritize effort on things that are bringing in the most income and the most return.
Classic, less is more.
Exactly. And it can be hard sometimes because lots of these events have been going on for years and years and years. And for a whole host of reasons, people have either got bored doing them, or the competitors now have a similar race that they market more, or whatever it might be. There are lots of examples of very well known kind of charity vehicles that the income has started to come down, but almost those charities have an attachment to that event or to that way of bringing in income, which means that they don't really want to be able to pull out of it or reduce effort in it. And I think the other thing is a lot of charities are really thinking quite carefully about things like innovation and thinking quite carefully about the teams they have and thinking about what are those new ideas out there that they want to harness.
Okay.
And sometimes spending a lot of money on kind of individuals and teams who are looking at product development and looking at innovation. In my view of those, and I've set up a few of them in a few national charities, the mistake again is trying to think that you're going to find the next ice bucket challenge. You're going to find the next groundbreaking thing that's going to go viral and global, rather than really sweating what you've already got. Really thinking quite carefully about how you're raising money at the moment and how to optimize that, rather than having expensive teams who, for want of a better phrase, sit on beanbags stroking their chin thinking about what the next ice bucket challenge is. And I've had conversations with directors of fundraising who will say, I need a team who are going to find me the next ice bucket. And that, in my view, is missing the point. They could have hundreds of current events they're already doing, and maybe in some areas doing badly and bringing in not enough money, and yet they want to concentrate on the effort on finding something, a silver bullet that's going to save them income-wise.
No, because the ice bucket challenge, let's just say, that's like lightning in a bottle. It was you trying to capture that, as you say, silver bullet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there are lots of other areas. I mean, a great example in terms of an area of growth is around corporate giving. So a lot of corporates are now full of people in terms of their staff who are increasingly socially conscious. And so there's been a big change in that area where it's moved away from corporates just giving lots of money or just kind of just a large grant to really wanting to partner with charities. So charities can work with their staff from a campaigning point of view or from an educational point of view, and really trying to identify ways in which you can find companies and corporates who want to be a genuine partner. And there's a huge growth area in that bit.
I would say the sort of biggest I wouldn't say corporate, but foundation of the recent times is Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation, which pretty much it came from nowhere, but in the last sort of is it 8 years now or is it 10 years?
About 10 years, I think.
Yeah, they've made huge strides with like fighting malaria, and I think sanitation's going to be one of their big things as well. Which, if you think about it, was not a thing if this was 2002 or like early 2000s, late 90s. Excuse me, wasn't even a thing. But yeah, corporate giving.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an example where corporates set up a separate foundation. So rather than just having an annual or a biannual way to partner with a few charities, they actually set up a separate kind of entity. I think the Gates Foundation, who I've done a bit of work for a malaria partnership based in Geneva. What's interesting and a good lesson learned there is while they are not just focused on malaria is one of their focuses. And when I've worked with other foundations, often, usually set up by incredibly well-meaning people, in my view, they often spread their net too widely. They want to help everyone, and they'll have a long list of objectives as a foundation that they want to reduce homelessness. They also want to increase kind of employment among the youth, or and they have a whole list of things they would like to do, and therefore they end up giving money to lots and lots of organisations in quite small amounts, sometimes make a difference, sometimes not, rather than actually thinking about focusing a bit more and saying, where do I really want to make a tangible difference? Where can I make a big impact? And if the Gates Foundation had spread their, let's face it, large sums of money across every single cause that might want Microsoft money, they might have, I'm sure they've done some, would have made little bits of impact everywhere. But not as much impact as if you commit £1 billion to ridding the world from malaria. And then you can actually make a proper impact on one specific thing. And I think a lot of foundations should think more carefully about where they can genuinely make impact, which might mean, going back to the thing you said a minute ago about kind of less is more, actually focusing a bit more on a specific cause, which may change every 3 years, or it may stay the focus and doesn't just have to be one thing, but it shouldn't be 20 things, it shouldn't be 30 things, and really think about where where money could have a real big tangible impact. Because some of these foundations, we're talking millions and millions, billions of pounds, that if they focus their efforts on specific areas of need, whether it be in this country or indeed globally, they could make a massive impact rather than spreading that across thousands and thousands of different causes and needs.
Okay. It feels like there's a sort of 19th century renaissance going on back in the day where it was the Roundtree Foundation. Now, with, I think, Google has one, also Amazon has one. I know it's like big tech at this present time, but hopefully they will be able to sort of be that main domino to knock down many a thing.
Yeah, and what's exciting about that, I think some of them being set up because the founders of those companies genuinely want to make a difference, and some of it because they think that it looks good in their annual report, or it's good for their stakeholders or investors. But some of these foundations, as I said, are huge in terms of the impact that they could have, and its impact that the government may not be having or can afford to make or can afford to actually focus on certain areas. And if those foundations do prioritize the things they want to change in this world, they could play a massive role in doing things like ending malaria or ending homelessness in London, which is a massive problem. They could do a lot of massive good if they really thought quite carefully about where they focused their effort and where they focused their grants.
Like, I'm getting, from the way you're talking, I'm getting a like sort of real buzz of optimism in the air. Like, for you, would you say that is commonplace? Do you think other people are actually seeing the opportunity which is sitting there before them?
In terms of charities?
Yeah.
I think it's very, very tough in charities at the moment. And I think it's quite hard to see optimism because it's concerns about the economy. It's harder and harder to fundraise. It can be hard to recruit people. There are a lot of pressures on charities at the moment, and there's also kind of big concerns about the reputation of charities because of lots of kind of scandals that have hit over the last few years. I'm generally quite an optimistic person, as you know, and I think focusing on particularly factors that you can't control, like the economy, isn't fruitful and isn't useful. I do see lots of areas and reasons to be positive. We have young people who are increasingly socially aware, who want to do good, which I'm not sure when you and I were growing up was the norm necessarily, that everyone wanted to would necessarily go to a march about climate change, for instance.
I would say the difference when we were growing up, it was harder to sort of galvanize people, whereas today with the sort of like social media and everything like that,
you can mobilize people a lot more easily. You're right. But for whatever reason, the young, those that are, most people are younger than you and I, meanwhile, but
speak for yourself.
Are really are very passionate, whether it be about climate change or lots of other things. I think charities are struggling a little bit to how best to harness that passion when it comes to volunteering or when it comes to fundraising. But that is a reason to feel positive. If you're a charity and you have a increasingly growing area of society who cares passionately about giving something back, but the onus is on charity to think quite carefully about how best to harness that, not only in terms of the channels they use, in terms of social media and things, but also when it comes to things like volunteering, how best to harness that passion whilst recognizing that a young person may not be able to commit years and years working in a charity shop, and therefore thinking quite carefully about how you engage that audience. But I think it's a positive thing, and that charity should be thinking positively about that, rather than just focusing on worrying about the economy.
Okay, great. Has there been any one sort of particular charity which you've seen like sort of take the lead at present, or like sort of like, you know what I mean, going in that sort of new direction?
There's lots of examples of charities, and I obviously don't want to talk about the charities that I work with, but
no.
But I think lots of charities are doing a lot of innovative things. I mean, Movember, for instance, have recently really focused on men's mental health, which is still the biggest killer of young men globally. And while they moved away a bit from just a focus more broadly on men's health or indeed prostate cancer. And from a campaigning and a fundraising point of view, they focused on an area not only for fundraising means in terms of that it was perhaps more tangible and real. But also from a campaigning point of view, really focused on an area where they felt there was an education to do in terms of how to help young men access services and really start talking to people. And they made great strides in terms of things like football and finding the vehicles and the mechanisms in which to get their message across. And there are lots of other examples of charities doing things innovatively. I think some of the larger charities find it a bit like a large company, find it quite hard to move nimbly and quickly. And it's often not until they have to, because of big concerns about income, that they then think we have to do things differently. And then they might think, well, what is everyone else doing? What are the things we can learn? And what are the things we can change? But a lot of large charities, if it's been working for them for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, why change? Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Which I can imagine can be quite frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Oh, man. No. This is a wealth of information picking up here. It's like, getting much more of a clearer sort of insight, like into the sort of charity sector, and like a little bit more of a clearer insight of what you have to sort of go through on a sort of day-to-day basis. To me, it's not easy, especially when you go up to someone, you need, like, say, you need to change. And when that person hears that, no, we're quite happy the way we are. Why should we change? Everything's fine, and it's a sunny day, where you can just look at the raw data and go, it's not a sunny day.
And sometimes, and that's often a problem, the quality of data and the information which large charities have at their disposal to manage their organisation is often very poor. And I think there are lots of elements of the private sector that the charity sector do much better. But I think on the data side and the kind of performance management side, it's often, including the largest charities in this country, the data they have is poor. Their ability to see what's wrong, where it's going wrong, why it's going wrong, is really challenging to get hold of, and therefore it's not reliable, and therefore it's not trusted, and therefore decisions are not made, both in terms of internal operation as well as the impact they're having on the people they want to serve, whether that be around heart disease or whether it be around cancer, actually robustly measuring the impact they're having. So if they're spending hundreds of millions of pounds, what impact are they having? And really finding a robust way to measure that, most charities find really challenging. As well as I said, their internal operation. They tend to worry a lot about income and expenditure. Beyond that, it tends to be very poor in terms of the quality of management information, which does sometimes mean when me and my team come in, we tell them some quite uncomfortable truths, having looked at their data and done a lot of kind of analysis as what's going on. It can then be, as you say, quite a difficult conversation as well.
Okay. Like, if there were 3 things you could change within the charity sector, what would those 3 things be?
Wow, only 3. I would change lots, but I think the quality of leadership and governance. I think for large charities, they can afford to pay big salaries, and I'm one that doesn't believe in a Victorian view of charities that people should just be volunteering. These are big organisations, big operations, and you need people who are properly qualified to do that. You shouldn't overpay them, but you should pay them clearly decently. And lots of large charities can't have the excuse that they have poor leadership because they don't pay well. They do pay well. But I think they don't look further afield enough when it comes to recruitment. And the quality of leadership, I find, not in all charities, but with a lot that could be better. And then on the governance side, how senior teams, including trustees, who are on trustee boards, do they have the right skills to actually help charities? Do they care enough? And does the senior team, when it comes to staff, work as a collaborative, effective senior team? And quite a few charities that I've worked with, I would say the answer is no. And then that is a massive issue for the whole organisation. And that is a kind of key theme. So leadership and governance, I certainly would change. I think the one I've just mentioned around management information, I think it's one of those things that if you run a business, you need to know not just about income and expenditure, but you need to know the pipeline of work, you need to know the views of your customers. There are a whole host of things which, if you run a business, you should care about, and most businesses care about and have access to data. But a lot of large and medium-sized charities don't. They don't routinely capture that data. They don't routinely look at it, which really impacts their ability to run their organisation effectively.
Yeah, and I would think it's quite strange in today's sort of business environment. If it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I can understand how that sort of data and information could be kind of obscure. But with the sort of tools which are around today, it leads to a lot more transparency within any organisation, be it charity or corporate or like a little shop on the corner.
Completely. And the third one, as you've asked me for three, would be, and it's kind of linked to the culture piece, but charities, what's wonderful about working in charities is you work with really passionate people who care about what they do, and who are really connected to the cause often, and are not only incredibly talented at what they do, but also care. And the two don't always come hand in hand, of people who have talent as well as who care. But what I see a lot in charities is that can lead to a culture where, for want of a better phrase, they are too nice when it comes to dealing with performance management of staff. They're conflict averse. They don't want to have difficult conversations, which isn't just about firing people. It's also about identifying where underperformance is and helping and supporting those employees with it. Because it can sometimes lead to a culture where they want to avoid conflict. They have a view, in my view, a view which isn't accurate, that people, that they're lucky to have people work for them. Therefore, having difficult conversations about someone's performance, they can't really have that because, I'm sure if we lose them, they could earn 5 times more in the private sector, which is something I've heard a few times, which is nonsense, frankly. But also it kind of misses the point. If you care about your employees and you care about the work that you do and the services that you deliver, and the difference you make to this world, you should want highly talented, motivated, high-performing individuals.
To basically help raise your standards across the board.
To help raise your standards. And the only way to ensure you have a workforce that is talented, highly motivated, and is delivering, is to tackle underperformance, as well as share high performance, and really any kind of approach which, for the reasons of conflict aversion or a lack of processes within HR that lead to you not having those difficult conversations, means you are doing a disservice to the people that you serve. You end up having people in jobs that it's probably not very fun for them. They know that they're not performing, but no one's had a conversation with them about why. No one's helped and supported them, or in some cases that they're not the right person for the job. But I've seen examples where people have stayed in that job for years, and those conversations haven't happened. And the knock-on effect for that organisation and the people that rely on those organisations and the money that they generate is huge. And they have a duty to ensure that they look at underperformance and have a workforce of highly motivated, talented people.
Yeah. No. Excellent. No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. With regards, just sort of stepping away from the sort of charity sector, you've been also doing lots of work with schools as well. I know you've been doing work with schools here and abroad. What sort of areas have you been kind of focusing with schools?
So I set up another company with the former chief inspector for independent schools, a lady called Dame Christine Ryan, having run the consultancy for the independent schools inspectorate for a few years. So we've been mainly focusing on inspection and quality assurance of schools. Recently in the UK, been working with the DFE on some proposals about how best to inspect virtual schools. If you imagine mechanisms such as Ofsted work very well in a classroom-based environment. But how do you ensure quality of provision if you're delivering your learning online, for instance? Because the people who are receiving those services and in some cases paying for them should still expect high quality education. But the mechanisms to inspect schools that are classroom based are clearly not suitable if you have your students that are spread all over the world or spread all over the country. So that's one area. Then the other area in the Gulf, we've been working with a country who wanted to set up a new school accountability quality assurance. They didn't want to use the word inspection, but they wanted to find a way in which they could ensure the quality of their schools. A lot of countries in the Gulf look to the British education system as kind of best practice about how best to do that. So been working over there the last couple of years to help them set up a new it's kind of a school inspection process, but it's kind of quality assurance process and training school inspectors to be able to do that.
Okay. Wow. I see. What have been sort of some of the sort of challenges with that sort of type of business? Because you're doing like having to communicate with the school inspectorate, I imagine, and then basically communicating with the actual clients you want to actually speak to. But what have been some of this?
Yeah, I mean, in some of the countries that I've worked in, they don't have a existing inspectorate, so we're kind of starting from very much the kind of bottom up of creating these things.
Yes.
I think the challenge often is trying to design new systems and processes and approaches which respect and are adapted to the country that they're in. But you can't just lift and shift a British inspection process that might work very well with the schools that you and I went to, or indeed for kind of independent schools.
Yes.
It won't necessarily work in terms of culturally, as well as a whole host of other areas with different countries, and sometimes those countries can assume that you can just completely replicate it, plug and play. But a lot of work that we do is to really understand what those nuances are culturally. What are the differences of the teaching staff? What are the differences in terms of the students? What are the schools trying to deliver? Which isn't the same. That just as all schools in this country are not the same, the variety of schools you find internationally, both in terms of their curriculum, but also in terms of their culture, are very, very different. And therefore you have to ensure that whatever you put in place works and adapts to those different situations. Which is not just about things such as language and translation, but also thinking about cultural norms and thinking about the different priorities that the country has.
Like I would imagine in some regards to some countries, their sort of expectations on results would be sort of wildly optimistic.
Completely, and a lot of those countries are wanting to heavily invest in education because they want to invest in their young people and really grow their country. But their expectations, as you say, are sometimes way off. And this sometimes comes back to data in that they sometimes have been told by various people within their own governments that they are better than they think they are. And making sure that they have an accurate picture of where they are now and a realistic picture of where they can get to, which doesn't mean dumbing things down and doesn't mean lowering expectations. Every country should have the highest possible expectations for their young people. But equally, you have to recognise where you start from, and because otherwise you end up going through. You have a child going through their education where the head teacher and the Minister of Education may be convinced that they're providing an education that's on that's on par internationally,
Yeah.
whereas in fact it's not. And unless you recognise where you are currently, you can't really think quite carefully about where you need to invest in and where you need to improve.
That sounds like a very delicate conversation to have.
It can often be very, very delicate.
Don't want to say, well, your kids, well, how can I put this?
Yeah, a bit like the Charities idea. I've had to got used to having quite a lot of delicate conversations with people about what's happening in their organisation or their country. Yeah.
We won't go deep into that because you might have to return this for these places.
Exactly. That's why I'm not naming any countries.
No, they're all great and they're doing wonderful jobs all around the world. Congratulations to whoever you might be. You have bright, very bright children.
But it's not. I mean, I know you're joking, but it clearly isn't about the intelligence of children.
Oh yeah.
And I think that one of the things we often find, my business partner, is that there's been an over focus on teachers rather than teaching. So there's a focus on giving on trying to hire the best teachers, and paying them big salaries and then giving them a checklist of what makes the perfect teacher. Whereas in fact, what your focus should be is on the student, the impact the teaching is having on the student. Yeah. Because if you can have the best qualified teacher in the world and pay them a huge salary, if the students are still not learning and need progressing, then it clearly isn't effective.
Yeah, no, that if it's about building those one-on-one relationships, and if you can't do that, as you say, you can pay them all the money in the world, but doesn't mean they're going to get that individual child to pick up that pencil, pick up that pen, to step up to the plate and make things happen.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And having realistic but ambitious expectations of the children in that classroom, which whilst sometimes we find that it's unrealistic expectations in terms of imagining that they're overperforming or kind of performing international norms, there can also be expectations that are too low, that to think, well, we can't possibly expect us to be hitting this, and every country should expect the best possible for their children, and sometimes I've found working with governments that their expectations are too low, that they think, well, we're a developing country, we can't expect our children to be meeting that, and that's the wrong starting point. Surely you should be concentrating on delivering the best possible education. There are restrictions sometimes with resources, obviously, but you shouldn't start on the premise that your expectations are low for students.
But I think anyone who actually refers to like the developing country, first and foremost, they've already sort of like hardwired the excuse into play before they actually do anything.
Completely, and I actually use the term developing not just in terms of some of the poorer countries in this world, but there are lots of actually very rich countries that are still developing their infrastructure, still developing their systems, because they might have recently found wealth through natural resources and things, and they're not developing the strictest sense of the word in terms of a poor country, but they are still just putting in place the building blocks for a society often, and they might have had a population explosion because they found oil or whatever, and so they're still trying to think quite carefully about how should they structure their education.
It's basically their education system's not a matured thing at this present time, so getting those sort of delicate nuances is tricky, to say the least. But with that, what's been the most challenging thing you would say about it?
On the education side?
Yeah, on the education side.
The one thing about the education system in general, and in pretty much every country, is it's very hierarchical. And it's exactly the same in the UK. People who become school inspectors in this country, for instance, would have invariably been a head teacher. They've been used to telling people what to do. And then if they're an inspector, they then tell other head teachers what to do. As far as now, good school inspectors shouldn't be doing that. But so I think one of the hardest things about, and it kind of goes back to having difficult conversations, is with an industry that is very hierarchical, as well as age-based. So if you don't have enough grey hair, if you haven't spent decades in the education system, there can be quite a lot of cynicism about the value that you can add. And when me and my business partner, although Christine does have decades of experience in education, we do come up against sometimes people who feel because they have worked in that country or indeed in parts of education for decades, and they think that I'm not old enough to offer any thoughts in this, or indeed because I haven't been a head teacher, I don't have any right to. That can be a really, really big challenge. And you have quite entrenched views in a very hierarchical industry, which can sometimes be very, very challenging to address.
So trying to break down those like hard heads, as we say, can be somewhat of a challenging day.
Yeah, it can.
Okay.
It's making me realise that I just often have lots of difficult conversations with people. Yeah. Which doesn't sound like a lot of fun, does it?
It's like, well, hey, you know what? This is what you signed up for.
Well, I know. It's completely my fault.
So this is why you started these businesses. Like, if you thought it was going to be easy and a sunny day,
I should have done something else.
Absolutely. Like painting in the south of France. Well, maybe not the south of France right now. It's okay.
No, maybe one day I'll go off and do that. Yeah.
I'm sure. Now, with regard to sort of like a lot of this, there's been, I can imagine, lots of personal development along the way. Like, sort of, what sort of tools have you used to sort of help with that personal development?
Interesting question. I think it's been particularly important since kind of 2010 when I was running my businesses. So when you're working for big firms, you get lots of coaching, lots of formal and informal training and guidance. Whereas the last 10 years, I really haven't had that. So I kind of needed to seek it myself. I mean, I think I'm a great believer in learning from the people around you, and certainly at Aileron, what I've enjoyed doing is helping build a team of really smart people who really challenge me, who really get me to think differently about things, because I passionately don't believe in hierarchy, and I believe good ideas can come from absolutely anyone of any age or level, and trying to create a consultancy that actually lives and breathes that and recruits really smart but sometimes quite challenging people, which really helps me personally develop. I think specific tools, I've always found Myers-Briggs incredibly useful. It's a personality tool which they're probably most widely used kind of across the world, which looks at identifying your key drivers as an individual, which can work really well both on an individual basis, but as well as working with teams that I've done that with, to really understand the preferences and drivers, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, whether you're a feeler or a thinker. And that's not that everyone can be boiled down to a few letters and that everyone neatly fits into something like that. But it does make you think about your style and your preferences and how best to adapt that to individuals who have a different style to you. So when it comes to having those challenging conversations, thinking about people who are more data orientated than me, or are more extroverted than me, or perhaps need to see the evidence before they make a decision rather than go with their gut feel, and adapting how I work, how I speak, and how I interact with individuals with quite a different personality type. And it doesn't have to be a tool like that. It could be a whole variety of different things. But I think finding ways in which you can still stay true to yourself while recognizing that you can stay true to yourself and not adapt, and a lot of people just miss you, will not understand you because they don't see the world and understand the world the same as you do, and therefore finding ways to adapt how you speak, how you explain things, how you get your point across, and adapt it to different styles and approaches is incredibly effective, rather than just going with, this is the way I am, therefore I fully expect everyone to completely be impacted by me, which is not clearly realistic.
Not to be a mighty oak, be a reed in the wind.
Precisely.
Fair enough. There you go. Liking it a lot. If you what is your current favorite book? I know.
By just throwing questions at me, you might have like slightly prepared me before. My favourite book, favourite book. It's not a recent book, but Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, is still one of my favourite books.
Okay.
So Malcolm Gladwell has did a very famous book called The Tipping Point, and he's done quite a few different books. But Blink is a fascinating book about what he calls thin slicing. It's basically the science behind gut instinct.
Right.
It's about what we sometimes think is gut instinct is actually just our brains taking a lot of different small bits of information and helping us trigger an action. Which we might think, well, my gut instinct told me to cross the road at that time, not others. And actually your different senses have taken in lots of different bits of information.
Yeah.
Partly from what you're seeing and sensing, and partly what you've experienced in life, to cross the road because you're worried about a group of people. And it may not be you're worried about them because their age or how they look. You just have a sense. And the reason you have a sense and a gut instinct is because of it's not because of a lack of data. It's because your brain's actually made the decision quicker than you consciously considering what that data is. You just made what you think is a gut instinct, and actually that gut instinct is still based on a lot of data. And it's a fascinating book, and it looks not only at kind of personal behavior driven by that, but also advertising. So for instance, it looked at 7-Up and how they looked at how much yellow or green they put on the label, on the can, would impact how much lemon or lime people tasted in the drink. They didn't taste the drink, but people thin sliced. I see yellow, I'm going to taste lemon. I see green, I'm going to taste lime. And it's a big thing in advertising about why their packaging is so important. Sort of what it instills and inspires in you, and the audiences, they want to get that key message across. So it's a fascinating book. I would recommend to anyone.
Perfect. I'm currently going through Sapiens at this present time.
Sapiens is a great book as well.
Yeah,
fascinating.
I'm only, I think, 4 chapters in, and thing what sort of blew my mind is where it's we're wheat basically made us. It's work, bitch.
And it made us stay put.
Yeah,
it made us stop being hunter gatherers.
Yeah.
And I think you've got this part of the book, and I won't spoil it if you have, but the point in which communities, as we have evolved, need rules, whether that be religious rules, governance rules. Once you get beyond a certain number of people, you can't just have people doing their own thing. You have to have someone who organizes, and you have to have a set of rules, whether that be a set of rules ordained by a deity, or they be rules
by a supreme leader,
or whatever. And it's that's another fascinating book. So good choice.
Like it a lot so far. But yes, we have been going at this for 1 hour and 7 minutes. Wow. Yes. Now, is there any questions you'd like to ask me, by any chance?
Wow, I get to answer.
You can answer a question.
Well, okay. What over the last? I mean, I think we've worked out we've known each other for about 25 years. What would you say, in terms of your own personal development? What was a period in your life or moment in your life that you learnt the most in those 25 years?
Learnt the most in those 25 years. It sort of goes through sort of ebbs and waves. I sort of go through sort of hyper patches where I'll be learning a lot, and then there'll be a long sort of I've been sort of cruising along. I would say I've done a lot more cruising than I like over the sort of last sort of 20 years or so, but I'm trying to I'm working on changing that, and basically through a number of different methods to sort of help me sort of grow and push myself, get myself out of my own comfort zone. So I would say I've been very much aware more of it over the last 3 years, and it's I'm trying to get everything into gear to push for the next 10, 20 years. I'm not too sure what form that might take yet, but as I say, it's not a very clear answer, but I know.
I mean, we started off with politics. It's quite a good kind of politician answer, me. Right?
Maybe politics one day. Who knows?
Maybe politics.
Yeah, but yeah, hopefully, I will be down, growing a little bit better, getting a little bit wiser as time goes by. But we shall see.
Well, you remain one of the wisest, most positive people I've ever met in my entire life. So I have no doubt that you will nail it.
Well, I'm sure I will. And your check's in the mail. Or do you prefer bank transfer? He prefers bank transfer.
Either that or cheese and wine works.
Oh, well, cheese and wine, don't worry.
It's good.
I'll get you a little hamper on your way. Can't delve too much, as you can see. I'm doing this podcast in the bedroom. So, yeah. But yeah, where would people be able to find you on your social medias, do you reckon?
Have to confess that I don't do lots of social media because I can't really talk about the work that I do. LinkedIn, it's very easy to find me. I think I'm the only Jonah Grunsell on LinkedIn, so that's probably the easiest thing. Or if you put Alaron into Google, that will come up as well. But yeah, kind of it helps business wise how easy it is to find me. But it means I have to make sure that I both continue to do a good job and don't really mess anything up, because otherwise there is no escape. Because as far as I know, I'm the only Jonah Grunsell on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on anywhere. So yeah, there's a bit of an onus on me to make sure that I behave myself and that I carry on doing a good job.
I'm sure you will be doing a fantastic job from now until the future. Yeah, but okay, what I'm going to say is, sir, my friend Jonah, thank you very much for doing this today. It is much appreciated. Yes, no doubt I'll have you on the podcast again, but talking more on more fun things.
Yeah.
And yeah. But yes, but for this, I thank you. I am grateful. I'd like to thank anyone who is out there listening to this now. 280 downloads so far. Yeah. And yeah, I'd like to say have a fantastic day. Be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic, be all the bees you can be. And thank you. Bye-bye.